Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. It's strange how life can take an unexpected turn when you least expect it. Sometimes, the quiet evenings we take for granted become the nights we never forget. That's exactly what happened in this story. I didn't see it coming, and honestly, I don't think anyone could have prepared me for what unfolded. My stepdad walked in at the wrong time, and that single moment changed everything. I want you to picture this: a calm night, the kind where the house feels almost too quiet, where every small sound seems louder than usual. The glow of a television screen lit up the room, and the air carried that mix of comfort and unease, like something was about to happen. In that silence, emotions were running high, boundaries blurred, and choices were being made that could never be taken back. That was the exact moment the door opened, and suddenly, nothing would ever feel the same. This isn't just another story about family tension or household drama. It's about temptation, mistakes, and the way one decision can spiral into a secret that feels impossible to keep hidden. At its heart, this is a story about love, betrayal, and timing. And sometimes, timing is the one thing we can't control. What happens when someone sees something they were never meant to see? What happens when a secret is exposed at the very worst possible moment? Before we dive into the details, let me say this. Everyone involved in this story is over 20 years old. This isn't a teenage drama, it's a complicated, grown-up situation. And while it may sound like something straight out of a movie, I can tell you it's real, raw, and deeply personal. You'll soon meet the people at the center of it all. There's me, caught between feelings I couldn't fully explain and choices I wasn't ready to face. There's my stepdad, who walked in at a time that will always feel unforgettable. And behind it all, there's the question of loyalty, trust, and the consequences of crossing a line that should never be crossed. I'm not going to spoil everything just yet. The real story is in the details, the words said in hushed voices, the looks that lingered too long, and the footsteps that came down the hall at exactly the wrong moment. That's where the tension builds. That's where the truth lies. And trust me, once it all begins to unfold, you'll understand why that night is impossible to forget. The moment that door opens still echoes in my memory, but before I tell you what came next, you need to understand the setting, the people, and how everything reached that point. Because stories like these don't just happen out of nowhere. They grow slowly, quietly, like shadows that creep across the floor before you realize the whole room has gone dark. I had been living with my mom and stepdad for a few years. At first, everything seemed fine, ordinary even. My stepdad was the kind of man who worked hard, stayed busy, and carried himself with a calm presence. He wasn't overly strict, but he had this way of noticing everything, as if no detail slipped past him. That alone made what happened even more dangerous. He wasn't the type to ignore what he saw. Our family life wasn't perfect. There were cracks in the walls we never patched up, little silences that carried more weight than arguments ever could. Sometimes my mom would stay late at work, sometimes she seemed tired of trying to hold everything together, and in those quiet spaces, I often found myself searching for connection. Loneliness has a way of making you see things differently, of making you vulnerable to feelings you might otherwise avoid. Around this time, I had met someone who changed the rhythm of my days. It wasn't planned, and it certainly wasn't simple. What started as casual conversations slowly turned into moments I found myself replaying at night, over and over. There was an ease in the laughter, a spark in the way our eyes would meet, and suddenly, the lines between friendship and something deeper weren't so clear anymore. I think that's what made the night my stepdad walked in so powerful. It wasn't just about being caught in a compromising moment, it was about being caught in the middle of emotions that were already so tangled. And once feelings grow past the point of being hidden, every secret becomes a ticking clock, just waiting for the wrong second to reveal itself. Looking back, I wonder if he had sensed something even before that night. You know how some people just feel the energy in a room? He was like that. Sometimes I'd catch him glancing in ways that made me wonder what he really knew. Other times, I convinced myself it was all in my head. But deep down, I think he already felt the shift, the unspoken tension that had been building. This story isn't just about one mistake. It's about how temptation lingers when no one talks about what's really going on. It's about the danger of silence, of pretending things are fine when in reality, they're anything but. And maybe you've been there too, holding a secret so close, feeling like it's burning you from the inside out, yet terrified of what might happen if anyone ever finds out. The truth is, there's always more behind closed doors than anyone outside could guess. Every family has its stories, its hidden corners where feelings are tucked away. The difference is whether those feelings ever come into the light. After that night, the air inside the house never felt the same again. My stepdad didn't say much, not right away, but his eyes told a different story. It was like he carried questions he wasn't ready to ask, and I carried answers I wasn't ready to give. Every moment felt heavier, every silence stretched longer. And that's when the real conflict began, not with shouting, but with the quiet weight of knowing something had been seen, something that could never be unseen. The days that followed were filled with subtle changes. At breakfast, he'd linger at the table a little longer, as if studying every move I made. At night, I could feel his presence more than ever, like the sound of footsteps outside a closed door that never come inside. It wasn't confrontation, it was tension. The kind that builds slowly, silently, until it's almost unbearable. Meanwhile, the relationship that had started all of this continued to grow, but it wasn't carefree anymore. Every smile, every stolen glance, carried the shadow of what had already happened. I knew the risk. I knew that timing, more than anything, could destroy it all. But sometimes, when your heart feels alive in ways it hasn't in a long time, risk becomes something you push aside, even when you know it's standing right in front of you. What made things worse was the distance in my mom's eyes. She was still caught up with work, barely noticing the small cracks forming around her. She had no idea that a storm was already inside the house, waiting to break loose. And maybe that was part of what kept me pulled deeper into the secret, the way it felt like I was finally being seen, even if it was by the wrong person at the wrong time. My stepdad, though, he was no fool. I could tell he was piecing things together, little by little. He never accused, never spoke directly, but sometimes it's the unspoken words that are the loudest. A look across the living room. A pause before leaving the room. The way he'd close his hands into fists, then let them fall open again, like he was holding back more than anyone could imagine. At the same time, part of me wondered if he wasn't just angry, if maybe he was conflicted too. Because the night he walked in, it wasn't just shock I saw in his eyes. There was something else there, something I still can't fully describe. And that unknown only added to the suspense of what would happen next. This is the kind of story where every character is holding their own secrets. My mom with her exhaustion, my stepdad with his silence, and me with feelings I couldn't deny even though I knew I should. It was like 3 lives circling around the same truth, none of us willing to say it out loud, but all of us feeling it more each day. Nights felt the heaviest. Every creak in the hallway, every door closing, made my heart race faster than it should. I could sense that something was building, something that none of us could keep buried much longer. My stepdad's silence had turned sharper, like a blade just waiting to be drawn. He still hadn't spoken directly about what he saw that night, but his presence carried the weight of unasked questions, and I could feel him watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The secret I was carrying wasn't just mine anymore. It had grown larger than me, stretching its shadows into every corner of the house. My mom's laughter, when it appeared, sounded thinner, like she too could feel the tension, even if she didn't understand where it was coming from. And every time I looked at her, guilt sat heavy on my chest, a reminder that the truth was hovering close, ready to shatter everything we had built. The moments that should have been simple, sharing a meal, watching TV, even walking into the kitchen for a glass of water, were loaded with meaning. I caught my stepdad's eyes too many times, and every glance was like a silent confrontation. Sometimes it looked like anger, other times confusion. And once or twice, there was something else I couldn't explain, something that only made the air between us feel more dangerous. The suspense wasn't just in what had already happened, it was in what was coming. I could feel the storm pulling closer each day. A small slip of words, a misplaced look, anything could bring the whole secret crashing down. It was like living in a house where the walls themselves were listening, where the truth echoed louder than the lies. One evening stands out above the rest. The house was quieter than usual. My mom hadn't come home yet, and that left me alone with him. The silence between us stretched so far that I almost broke it myself, just to release the pressure. But before I could say anything, he spoke, his voice low, almost too calm. It wasn't an accusation, not yet. It was a warning hidden inside a simple question. The kind of question that doesn't need an answer, because the person asking already knows. That moment tightened everything around me. I could feel my pulse in my throat, my mind racing to find words that wouldn't give me away, even though the truth was already there, hanging between us. And that's where everything seemed to teeter on the edge. One step forward could unravel it all. One wrong word could set the whole house on fire. The climax was coming, and deep down, I think we both knew it. The silence after his question was almost unbearable. My stepdad's voice still lingered in the room, low and deliberate, like he wanted me to hear more than just the words. He wasn't asking out of curiosity, he was testing me. My throat tightened, and every second that passed felt like an hour. I wanted to answer, to explain, but nothing came out. It was then that I realized this wasn't just about what he had seen. Something else was brewing beneath the surface, something that made the ground beneath me feel even shakier. The twist came not from him, but from my mom. That very same night, not long after he had asked that unsettling question, she walked in earlier than expected. Her hair was still damp from the rain outside, and she carried herself with the weariness of someone who had been holding secrets of her own. She looked at both of us, her eyes darting between the tension she couldn't miss, and for a moment I thought everything was about to explode. But instead of questioning why the room was so heavy, she sat down quietly, her face pale, as if she'd been carrying news she couldn't hide any longer. She revealed she had been offered a temporary transfer out of state for work, something that could take her away for weeks at a time. The shock of it hit me hard. It meant the fragile balance inside our home was about to shift completely. With her gone, the wall that stood between me and my stepdad's silent suspicions would disappear. The thought alone made my stomach twist. It wasn't just about secrets anymore, it was about what might happen when there was no one left to keep the tension in check. My stepdad didn't react the way I expected. He didn't argue, didn't try to stop her. Instead, he just nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as if he had already been expecting something like this. And when his eyes met mine across the room, there was no mistaking the intensity there. It wasn't relief. It wasn't anger. It was something far more complicated, like the beginning of a battle neither of us had chosen, but both of us knew was coming. The days that followed were thick with anticipation. My mom busied herself with preparing for her trip, distracted by logistics and schedules, leaving me and him circling each other in a house that felt smaller every day. The unspoken words between us grew louder, almost daring one of us to break first. I couldn't help but wonder if this was his chance to confront me, to corner me, to force the truth into the open. And then, something else shifted. One night, while my mom was upstairs packing, I overheard my stepdad on the phone. His voice was hushed, but the urgency was undeniable. He wasn't talking to a coworker or a friend, it was something different. A conversation that hinted he might not be as steady, as loyal, as I once believed. He said things that made me question everything, words that suggested he too was keeping secrets, secrets that might put mine to shame. That was the second twist. The man who had walked in at the wrong time, the one holding my secret over me, wasn't as clean as he seemed. And suddenly, the dynamic shifted. If he confronted me, I now had a weapon of my own. If he pushed, I could push back. But the danger in that was obvious. Two people holding each other's secrets is like standing with lit matches in a room full of gasoline. It only takes one wrong move to ignite everything. This is where the stakes rose higher than ever. It wasn't just about whether he would expose me, it was about whether I could expose him first. And with my mom about to leave, we were both standing at the edge of something far more explosive than I ever imagined. The night my mom finally left for her work trip, the house felt different. The walls seemed to echo more, the silence stretched further, and every movement felt amplified. I knew this was it, the moment everything had been building toward. No more distractions, no more ways to avoid the truth. It was just me and my stepdad, and the tension between us was ready to break. I was sitting in the living room when he finally spoke. His voice was steady, but there was no hiding the weight behind it. He said he hadn't forgotten what he saw, and that keeping secrets in a family only leads to destruction. For a second, my heart froze. I thought he was about to expose me completely, that he'd waited for this exact opportunity to corner me. But then I remembered what I had overheard, the phone call, the secrets he was hiding. And suddenly, I wasn't powerless anymore. I told him I knew. I told him I'd heard enough to understand he wasn't innocent either, that whatever judgment he had for me came with its own reflection in the mirror. For the first time, I saw real shock in his face. He didn't deny it. He didn't even try. Instead, he lowered his eyes and admitted he had been making mistakes of his own, choices that would have broken my mom's trust just as badly as mine had. The air between us was electric. Two people holding secrets that could destroy everything, now staring each other down in the dim light of the living room. It wasn't anger anymore, it was survival. He said if I stayed quiet, he would too. That what had happened that night, and everything that came after, would never leave this house. It was a pact sealed not with trust, but with fear. And that should have been the end of it, the resolution, the uneasy truce. But then came the final twist. As we sat there, locked in that fragile agreement, we both heard it, a soft sound at the doorway. My mom was standing there. She hadn't left yet. She had come back inside for something she forgot, and in that single moment, the weight of everything fell into her silence. Her eyes moved between us, sharp and knowing, and I realized she had heard more than either of us wanted her to. The climax wasn't just our secrets, it was hers too. Because in her face, I saw something unexpected. Not shock, not confusion, but recognition. Like she wasn't just discovering the truth, but confirming something she had already suspected for a long time. And that's where the story truly turns, because the one person we thought was in the dark may have been carrying her own secrets all along. That moment with my mom standing in the doorway changed everything. The silence stretched so long it felt like the whole house was holding its breath. My stepdad and I both froze, waiting for her to speak. But instead of shouting or demanding answers, she simply walked into the room, her face calm but unreadable. She set her keys down on the table and looked at us in a way that made it clear she wasn't surprised. When she finally spoke, her words were steady. She said she had been sensing something for a while, that the tension in the house hadn't been hidden as well as we thought. She admitted she had her suspicions, not just about me, but about my stepdad too. And that's when I realized the truth. She had known more than she ever let on. She hadn't confronted us earlier, not because she was blind, but because she was waiting for the moment when the truth would surface on its own. What followed wasn't an explosion of anger, but a conversation none of us expected to have. My stepdad admitted to the mistakes he had been making. I admitted to mine. And my mom, instead of falling apart, simply sighed as if she had been carrying her own weight of secrets all along. She didn't go into detail that night, but there was something in her eyes, a look that said she wasn't as innocent in this story either. The resolution came in a strange, quiet way. We made a choice, not to pretend nothing happened, but to acknowledge it, to let it change us instead of destroying us. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't clean, but it was real. The pact between me and my stepdad shifted from silence to understanding, and my mom's presence reminded us both that nothing stays hidden forever. In the end, the biggest lesson wasn't about betrayal or secrets, it was about the danger of letting silence grow too wide. Communication, no matter how painful, is always better than letting the truth rot in the dark. Because once secrets start piling up, they have a way of spilling out at the worst possible time. So here's where I leave you with a question. Do you think forgiveness is possible after secrets like these, or does betrayal always leave a scar that never fades? Comment your thoughts below, and let me know if you'd want to see a sequel to this story. Sometimes the ending is just the beginning of something even more complicated. Summary: this is a story about secrets, timing, and the unexpected ways truth comes to light. When my stepdad walked in at the wrong time, It set off a chain of events that uncovered hidden choices, silent conflicts, and truths none of us were ready to face. In the end, we learned that silence can be just as dangerous as betrayal, and that forgiveness, though difficult, can sometimes be the only path forward.